Hi everyone, welcome to the Bowlers Union podcast. We've got a great first guest tonight, Chris Wood. He's Hampshire's all-time leading T20 wicket taker, and he's very kindly been our guinea pig for the evening. How are you going, Chris? Are you right?
Evening, guys. Yeah, very welcome. Thank you for having me on. Really looking forward to getting going and be the first one on your podcast.
It's nice to have a proper left armour on the pod.
Don't know about that. One of us preferences these, and I'm allergic to red, and I think Keith's the polar opposite.
To be fair, if Hampshire merged you two into one bowler, they would save a fortune in wages, wouldn't they?
What a bowler. What a bowler.
Absolutely right. Yeah, crikey. If we're donating a few knees between us, though.
We might make up one knee, maybe.
Is that your injury of choice then, a knee injury?
Yeah, very much so, mate. I've unfortunately had 5 along the way. Certainly be the last one, but it's been an interesting journey with the old knees, that's for sure.
I think that'll be something we'll come on to, but start off, just got 5 quick fire questions, mate. It's just what you prefer. So first one is a 5 mile an hour of extra pace or a foot extra of bounce?
5 mile extra pace.
Good bounce or a good Yorker?
Good Yorker.
Swing or nip?
Nip.
Back of the hand slow it or knuckleball?
Back of the hand.
Over the wicket or round?
Over.
Interesting. I thought you would have gone extra bounce, to be fair.
Do you know what? At the 5 questions that I would have second guessed, it would have been that for a few different reasons.
Go on. Why?
Mainly from a conversation I had with James Vince actually quite a while ago. It's like throw him under the bus slightly, and it might put a few bowlers on the back foot as such. But we talked about kind of an optimal pace in T20, and actually I've spoken to other people outside of Vincey about this, and batsmen and their tempo and kind of that sort of optimal pace that they find comfortable facing in T20, if that makes sense. And what came out the washing machine often was, people that bowled, anywhere between sort of 75 and late 70s became quite difficult because the whole decision making process became slightly delayed. And anybody in that kind of 80 to 85 tended to be, not easier to face is the wrong word, but you play on reactions a lot more. Then obviously you've got the guys that bowl the extreme pace at the top end, and then that obviously challenges your technique and your reaction time in a different way. So that is the one. And when I actually thought it back, and you said a foot more of bounce, I was thinking, Christ, you're going to get a lot more playing misses with a lot more bounce than you are by me personally, someone that bowls late 70s, adding 5 mile per hour on.
So would you change the answer if you could?
Most definitely, yeah.
Fair play.
That's interesting. That just quickly on that, it's I remember Baron Chopra against pace, loved it, but as soon as we come against like a Darren Stevens or a Tim Murtagh, he would be panicking. He'd be like, "There's too many decisions I could make." Not that they were both that slow, but he just
absolutely
had to react from a ball, then actually have a little bit of time.
Yeah, they probably play 5 shots in the head rather than 1.
Class. I should have mentioned earlier, by the way, all the trophies you've won. So am I right in thinking you've won 3 T20 titles with Hampshire, 2 one-day cup titles since your debut in 2010? Is that right?
Yeah, and you can add in if you want, but I'm happy to keep it off because it's not quite the jugular. But we've had a Division 2 championship win as well.
No,
that's
fair.
Kind of half the games in that season, and it's I'd rather be sat here saying I won Div 1 championship, that's for sure.
Are you you've played consistently, haven't you, since your debut? Minus your injuries, you've been a pretty much an ever present in the teams.
Yeah, certainly in the T20. I was quite fortunate in the sense that the year I sort of broke through in 2010, Hampshire went through a slight transition. As the year, I think the year before that, we had, I think they went and try and side everybody under the book, and we had Simon Jones, Kabir Ali, a couple of South Africans, and they really went for the jugular to win the championship. And I think we ended up getting relegated at the end of 2009. So it was kind of a transition into that new year, and it was very much around, let's give the youngsters a go. I think, the likes of Corky was still around and Mascarenhas, but and Slug, Sean Irvine and Simon Katic. But around that was really, the 5 academy boys that came through together, myself, Briggs, Bates, Vince, Dawson, and you can add Hamza Riazdin to that at the time. There were sort of 5 or 6 of us that all started playing at the same time. And, it was quite a nice mix of your youth and experience. And I guess you could say, when I've been fit, kind of ever since, I've managed to find myself on the team sheet.
Just a quick one. Obviously, like, you've had a really successful career, especially in the white ball stuff. I know you haven't played as much red ball as you probably would have liked to in your career, not due to you not being good enough, but obviously your injuries, which we'll come on to later. But I've just lost where I was going with that. Right.
I think the point we've both looked at is you bowl at the start of an innings and you bowl at the death, and you've played for 15 years and done exceptionally well in a format where batsmen are always looking to work you out and stuff. So that's what we need to get to the root of, mate, is what you're doing that's enabled you to perform so well for such a long period. Yeah,
it's a good question, and one I've been asked a few times along the way. And I think ultimately it comes, or in the early days, it came down to one, opportunity and exposure. So given the chance from a very early age to open the bowling at the death, but also, I feel like I've had this unique way of going about it in the sense that, when I get fearful of situations, I just tend to attack them full on. And you're always going to fail, whether you're opening the bowling or bowling at the death in T20 cricket and in cricket in general. Actually what separates, the okay to the good to the exceptional, is how they bounce back from, bad games, failure, that voice on the shoulder that's telling you when you're running up to bowl, don't miss a Yorker, and all of a sudden you've missed and you've gone for 6 and you've gone, oh my God, what was I just doing? What was I thinking about? So I think a lot of the success comes down to, practice and evolving as well. I think T20 is a completely different game to when I started in 2010 to what it is now. And I think it will continue to go. And it's a case of, trying to keep up and, stay relevant in that space. And I guess another way I've been able to do that is because I had to give up 4-day cricket, 4 or 5 years ago to prolong my career, essentially. I've been able to put all of my practice into that, one area of the game.
Yeah, well, just quickly before we go on to injuries, I asked you the other day about how you came into the game and did you feel confident? And you said from day one, becoming a professional, you were quite confident. Is that something you always had, or is that something that you just realised that I need to have if I'm going to make it at this level?
I think there's always times, I think I've always been relatively confident, and there's always times throughout my career and still to this day, although they've got lesser, is when you really question yourself and question your ability, and I did that countless times when I was younger, between that 18 and 21 period, always thinking, are you good enough? But I guess I just, fronted up, continued to come back, and sometimes you've got to put on a brave face and go through those failures and kind of give that facade off, that you are this confident, and you're going to come back and you're going to execute next time. And that's not always the case. But more often than not, the way that I found is if I, faced up those fears I just talked about, and showed an air of confidence, and kept practicing hard and coming back, then I'd go on to be relatively successful.
That's great. So talking T20 specifically, what do you prefer, the first 6 overs at the start or the death? What's your favourite phase of the game?
I think I've probably fluctuated in different seasons. I'd have to say that now they're probably the death. I think it's not a dying art, but it's changing. When people bowled at the death 5 years ago, everyone was trying to nail a Yorker. And I look around world cricket now and I don't see that many bowlers, using the Yorker as their go-to delivery. It's all come about slur balls, deception, margin of error being bigger through bowling slur balls. And this perception, or I suppose reality as well, if you miss a Yorker by this much, right, then you're going to go for 6. I was very fortunate the last few years to play with Nathan Ellis. And he is an incredible death bowler and arguably for me, one of the best in the world. And I just think you can really influence games by being a good death bowler. You know, there's no better feeling than closing out a game when they need, 25 off 3 overs, and you're down to lose, and all of a sudden your 2 death bowlers pull through. And at the death, I think, at the start of the power play, for me it's very much based around Championship cricket, and that's been my philosophy for a long time. Is just hit the top of the stumps until someone does otherwise. And Dimitri Mascarenhas, used to say, just keep hitting the top of the stumps. It's still the hardest ball to hit in cricket, especially when it moves around a little bit. But for me, the most rewarding part is winning a game for the lads at the back end when you're up against it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a dying art having like really good death bowlers, and if you get hold of, if you got one, at least you've got a banker there. But if you've got 2 like yourself and Nathan Ellis, I think it's so much harder for a team at the end of an innings to get going, and that's where obviously teams pick up a lot of runs towards the end of an innings. What they hold out for sometimes, keeping just ticking over the scoreboard until those last 5-6 overs to really get going. So yeah, I can understand why it's really challenging, isn't it? Keeps you on your toes, keeps you thinking as well. Whereas at the top, you've only got 2 men out, and you are waiting for that batsman to do something. But sometimes when you've only got 2 men out, it's quite hard to then execute a skill and know that you've nailed it and got away with it almost. If you bowl to your field, it can really help, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree.
Is the Yorker dead then, Woody? Or I don't know what you think, Keith. Like, because you're right, you see a lot more bowlers now. They'll really mix up between slower balls, Yorkers, back of a length slower balls. Whereas certainly, you said 2010 when you started playing. I was playing a bit more T20 then, and so were you, Keith. Definitely, you were trying to bowl 4 or 5 Yorkers and over, weren't you?
Yeah.
So where's it gone?
Oh, I do believe it's becoming a dying art. You're seeing more and more fast bowlers now that are bowling in the power play and through the middle. It's becoming very, very niche for someone at the end. And there's some bowlers around the world now who would even bowl 3 at the end in a row, because that's the sort of the loose ends we're at with it now. And I think it's, don't get me wrong, the Yorker's the hardest ball to bowl in cricket for me. Your margins are so small, and often now T20 grounds, people will play them with short boundaries one side, big boundaries the other. So if you've got a short side, leg side, you're hiding the ball wide. If you've got a leg side boundary that's really big, often people go and slur balls into the wicket. I think it all just comes down to that, like margin of error that we're talking about. You can get your slur ball wrong by a meter and potentially get away with it, but you get your slur ball wrong by a foot, and you're going to go out the park. But for me, it's 100% still the best ball to bowl at the death.
That's fair enough. Just quickly, I'd like to know, because obviously I don't play with you at all at Hampshire. We've known each other for years, never literally stepped on the park at the same time. What would you say your pre-game routine is normally?
Yeah, so it's changed and evolved a little bit over the years due to various injuries. The last couple of years, I've had big surgeries in the winter, and it was all around coming back and just being able to get through a T20 season. And for me, that didn't look like an awful lot of preparation. Nowhere near as much as I'd like. And in an ideal scenario for me, my preparation would look like have a decent bowl a few days out, and then I would need that time to recover, because I do struggle with back-to-back days now, although I can get through. And then on the day of the game, optimal for me, would be going out and bowling, 4 overs at close to 100%, and practicing all those variations, making sure I'm on from the word go, in the sense of setting the tone up front, but also knowing that when I come to the back end, that I've practiced those skills, only hours before, the start of the game.
Because I think it's huge admiration to you, the fact that you're not able to, you're almost like the Ledley King of cricket. Like you are literally looked after. We need you looked after, and kind of make sure you're just ready to play almost. If you can get a bowl in a few days before, perfect. But the fact that you're not able to kind of get a good run into games as you'd like to, but still then perform, I think that's been an exceptional thing you've done. I think you've had a really good career of doing that, and it's not easy when you don't actually get the time to practice the way you want to. So fair play to you on doing that, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And to you guys too, right? As you get older, you lean on experience a lot more than you ever did when you were younger for obvious reasons. You've been there and you've lived it. And I'm sure you two are in exactly the same boat, as in, what you need, but often it's your mental headspace when you go out to play now, how much you want it, how much you want to be there, going back to action and all those things, you can just relive past experiences that get you through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'd agree with that totally, mate. Totally.
I think I would say it's easier in red ball in that you don't have so many variations perhaps to bowl in a warm-up. Do you know what I mean? Whereas T20, there's a big difference, isn't there, a white ball between practicing a wide Yorker, a stock ball, and a backhand slowie. There's a lot of things to kind of get feeling nice before a game. So yeah, fair play to you, mate. Yeah, done a good job.
What just a quick question. When you are not doing too well, like with letting the ball go or just not getting the areas you want to, what do you kind of try and fall back onto? So I know you just mentioned about experience, but what things do you like? What processes will you look to go through to try and get yourself back into it?
Yes. Sometimes, often for me, when things aren't going so well, it comes down to slight technical shifts. As well, Keith, as you well know, we talk about it, but often I deliver the ball from slightly past 12 o'clock. And some people have said that's why they've in the past found me awkward to face, because I come past that perpendicular. But occasionally that can get too far, and I often lose my front side quite heavy and end up pushing the ball across the right-handers.
Right.
Which occasionally has its pluses, but obviously in the power play you're looking to take wickets and swing the ball back. So often when things aren't feeling like they should be feeling, I often go back to a slight technical shift, and just a couple of things in my mind that I think about, and often one of them for me is because I'm slightly past perpendicular, I'll be saying to myself at the end of the mark, bowl the ball from 2 o'clock, sorry, not 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So I'm thinking to myself, get right this side behind it. And as we know, when you do things like that, whenever you bowl the ball, it's never as much as you thought it was. But often it gets me, closer to the 12 o'clock kind of mark. So just little things like that. And like we just talked about, experience of, when it has gone well. Because there's so many bad days. But when you can draw back on good experiences and just keep coming back, it definitely helps.
Also, obviously, you've mentioned a few times just about injuries. How have you, just so people know, what injuries have you had and how have you managed them for this long?
Yeah, so I've had one small little meniscal clear up a couple of years ago, and then my other 4 surgeries have been relatively significant. I've had 2 microfractures in both knees. It's a relatively straightforward surgery, but it requires a lot of rehab. You're non-weight bearing for 8 to 9 weeks, a leg in a machine, 8 hours a day, game ready, all the things that you've been aware of this winter, Keith, and previous surgeries. But it's incredibly grueling, lonely, space. Yeah, and I often look back and, I've got no doubt that my previous experiences, obviously I'm in recovery for gambling addiction, and some of those sleepless nights and not recovering properly are some of the reasons why that I might have gone on to have so many surgeries. And often sometimes I look back and if I chose a different path and I did things that I should have been doing, would I still be sitting here to this day playing 4-day cricket and all those things? But often the reality is that I did go down that path, and I have had those injuries. I'm certainly not having any more surgeries, that's for sure. But I think one thing that coming back from surgery has taught me is a level of resilience as well. And one thing Jamie Cook, our S&C coach, said to me, he said he read a book about a professional, I think it was AFL player who had like 12 surgeries. And they basically came out and said that you get one go at professional sports, so do whatever you can to play it for as long as you can. Because I've thought about giving up the game after my 3rd one, that thought of going through 9 months of rehab again just killed me, inside, all those lonely days on your bed with that leg in a machine, while all your teammates are training or playing or improving. And, but when Jamie said that to me, like, gave me the slight inspiration, you know, and that's right. Like, while you're still good enough, why wouldn't you try and play for as long as you can at the highest level? And that's one thing that stuck with me, and one thing that will stick with me, hopefully, for the last few years of my career.
That's incredible, mate. I had no idea you had quite that many, you know, serious setbacks. In terms of Red Bull, then, did you? I mean, clearly the decision has worked out well because you've really specialised and done incredibly well. But with the attributes that you've got, I'm sure you'd have done brilliantly in the Red Bull format. And I know you've actually got quite a nice, tidy record, given you've not played loads of the format. How do you think that might have gone for you had you played a bit more?
Oh, I absolutely loved playing 4-day cricket. You know, there was not many experiences like it where you come off the field at the end of 4 days with your teammates, you know, and you have a beer or a soft drink or whatever you're doing and celebrate a 4-day win. There's something really nourishing about that. And, you know, I never was the greatest 4-day bowler. You know, I struggled to shape it back with the Red Bull. But one of my strengths, if you want to call it, was, you know, accuracy. And everybody knows for longevity in the 4-day game, whatever pace you bowl, you have to be accurate to be successful. You know, and that was one of my sort of super strengths, if you want to call it that. You know, I could land the ball roughly in the same area, you know, time and time again. And I didn't move the ball big. I didn't nip the ball big, but I could go at 2.5 and over. And some of the teams for Hampshire, you know, that was fine. But it just got to a stage where I was trying to still play 4-day cricket with a dodgy knee. And I remember it so clearly. I think it was the year before Keith joined in 2018. You know, I worked so hard to get back to play 4-day cricket because I was desperate to play. And there's a few injuries knocking around at the start of that season. I ended up playing, I think, 3 in a row at the start. And, you know, and to most Red Bull bowlers, that will sound like nothing because you guys churn out, you know, 14 a year. But I remember it was at Notts, the third one, and I was just hanging. I could hardly run in. And I just thought to myself then, you know, is this really worth it? You know, I'm so desperate to do it, but I could be out of the game in the next 18 months if I continue to go down this route. And I quickly after that made the decision. But I'd love to be sat here talking to you guys now, saying I'd still playing Red Bull cricket for sure. I loved it.
Well, if you did, mate, I wouldn't have been signed. So yeah, just just quickly on that with your injury and stuff. Is it? I can't remember. I'm sure when I spoke to you about it years ago, is it the fact you don't have cartilage in your knees?
Yeah. So it's quite a unique injury in the sense of the positioning of it. For a start, it's kind of at the top left backside of the back half of the knee. And essentially what it is it becomes a hole in that part of the knee, and they need to, it's called a microfracture. So they essentially drill into the bone to try and get a new cartilage to grow. Essentially that cartilage is never good as the one that was originally there, of course. But what I have found with the surgery is if you can get past it and back 18 months beyond that surgery, you know, that knee comes pretty good again. It sounds, 4 surgeries sounds a lot, right? But I had the first one in 2012 and the second one in 2014. And then I've only just recently both had them done again. So they lasted sort of 6-7 years. Now, that's not to say they're going to last that long again. And I have no doubt that I won't be playing in 5-6 years. But they have given me bouts of periods of time when I have been able to play and, you know, my knee's not caused me an issue.
Just onto a bit more bowling. What variations would you say you've got, if you don't mind revealing them? Have you got a cricket ball on you so we can have a look?
Yeah, I have. nice white one.
Yeah.
So for me, it was very basic for a long period of time. You know, we talked about T20 evolving, and for a long time, I essentially just had, you know, your typical off cutter for left armour, and then the leg cutter just running the hands the other way. And I didn't have any other slower balls around that. And it was only till a couple of years ago when Graham Welsh joined. Both of you know really well. And, you know, the game was evolving and there were some seriously good bowlers out there, and the knuckleball came around, and it started to become all about deception of pace with an upright seam rather than, you know, your off cutters or your leg cutters. Everyone was starting to go out the back of the hand and trying to get this dip on the ball. And other people were going knuckleball, so it kind of wobbles down towards the batsman. And I thought, Christ, I've got to keep up with the game here, otherwise I'm going to get left behind. And actually, I worked on those for a short period of time after a surgery, but actually I didn't actually bowl them very often in games, purely because of what we talked about earlier, that preparation time. I was never comfortable of the success rate of that delivery. So they're two balls that I've wanted to have in my armour for a long time. And hopefully this winter, being fit for the first time in 3 winters, I'm actually going to be able to work on something and develop something new. Because it's gone of the days of, just being able to run up and bowl an off cutter. So it's evolving quickly.
And just on field positions, would you say, especially at the death, this is more towards the death, would you, because there's different types of death bowlers, are you someone who will pretty much make it clearly obvious most likely what you're going to bowl, or do you a bit more mystery kind of, you may double bluff?
Yeah, I've changed along the way. I'm actually probably more in the camp of, double bluffing, setting up and bluffing. Obviously, boundary size comes into play, of course, but I feel like I'm probably going to change this now after I tell you this, because people are going to look at this for next year. But for a period of time now, I've found my strongest ball is, a wide Yorker.
Yeah.
And often, certainly year before last, I had quite a lot of success of dragging people across the crease to the offside, because I was quite successful of bowling those wide Yorkers. People would edge across and all of a sudden they're showing their stumps. And I think the season before last, I think I had about 7 or 8 bowled around the legs. So part of it is about setting up by being predictable, and then not being shy of being slightly random, when people move across or back away or whatever it might be.
I think that's great. And I hope we, obviously down the line, I hope we can get a lot of young cricketers who are wanting to progress, taking that on board. Because I think there's a lot of lads who come into the game who just bowl and hope for the best. They don't really think much about it. And it comes on to the next question I wanted to ask. Sorry, right, I'm asking all the questions here.
Go for it.
I remember I would be someone who would definitely analyse a batsman when I'm bowling against them. So even if sometimes I got a sense of a batsman thinking, I can just feel that they're going to jump across to the offside and try and horn me leg side. Do you get any sort of feelings like that when you're bowling, or you just wait for them to react?
Absolutely. You get inklings, right? Often, like I said, I have 3 people out on the offside and they're stand to bat normally because they want to fill up the leg side for obvious reasons. There's only 2 people out and they're banking on you bowling straight, but you're not. But then they've got to change. And I think that is a knack of bowling at the death. I think a lot of the successful death bowlers around the world will be in their mind 1 step ahead. Like you talked about there, you're preempting what they're going to do. And I try and change that as late as I can. So at the top of my mark, I'm not thinking he's going to do this ball, but it's certainly, subconsciously there. And I tend to look for the feet as I'm running in. And as I'm about to deliver, if someone's going to move, they tend to deliver before you jump and gather, right?
Yeah.
I think that's been one of my positives over the year. I can see when they're going to move last minute and I can adjust and push it wide or follow them. I think that's where, some of my most successful spells have been, when I'm really on and I'm watching the feet and watching them move and reacting last minute and following them or pushing it wide.
I hope I phrase this question right, but do you focus on a batter's strength when you're building a game plan, or do you look at more what you do well and what the conditions suit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the latter, as much as I can. I'll always go to my strength first if it suits. Now, occasionally you'll go and play somewhere and Nathan Ellis will be bowling one end and my natural instinct will be to want to go wide at the death, for example, but then all of a sudden you come across a 50-yard boundary. And then it's all about weighing up, is your alternative ball to a long boundary going to be better than still that wide one that you can execute really well to a short boundary? And often us as bowlers will then go, well, percentages, right? I've got to bowl to a long boundary. And then often you bowl to a long boundary and it's not quite your strength, or you're not quite so familiar doing it. And then you get hit for a couple of sixes and you'll go, why the hell have I just done that? My strength is the wide Yorker. Yes, it's 50-yard boundary. But if I nail the wide Yorker, it doesn't matter how big that boundary is. They're not hitting it for 4 or 6, So I think, analysts have come into the game so much. as you both know, the last 2 or 3 years, and it's weighing up, batsmen's strengths and super strengths. But I'd always be guided to go towards my strength before theirs, for sure.
I love that answer. I was hoping you'd say that, for sure. I find sometimes analysts can kind of put the worst case scenario in your mind as well, and I don't think that's necessarily a great place to be when if you. Can you remember, Barks? Pop would talk about bowling at. Actually, you weren't at Essex. Played against Warwickshire, and he was talking about bowling at Tim Ambrose and about how good he was at cutting it.
Yeah.
And he reflected on it afterwards, and all he talked about was Tim Ambrose's cut shot and about how to avoid it. But literally,
then you
all
bowled
the
it.
Essex bowlers at the time just fed his cut. Yeah, and it was just all we had. We didn't have a nip it back and hit him on the shin. We had the negative kind of thing implanted in our heads. And I find analysts can sometimes do that when they say things like stay out of his pads. You know what I mean? He's strong through long on and cow and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's a fine balance between, making it about you and your team against worrying about the opposition too much. That's kind of my summary of it.
I think we, like in Red Bull with the analysis, we get told about players' strengths, but I think if you're wanting to be good, you have to back yourself to bowl your best ball first before you look at changing anything else. And that's why I think some younger, inexperienced players can maybe think, oh, I'm bowling against this batsman, and that fear of I can't bowl a cut, as an example, or I can't get too close to the pads, and they just do. And there's panic, and they don't then default to go, well, just bowl my best ball. They just freeze almost and lose that confidence. Yeah, so it can be quite difficult. I think you've always got to be front foot first and back yourself with your skill.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, it's a very generic question, but it's got to be asked. Is what advice you would give to a young, aspiring Chris Wood, an 18-year-old bowler who's perhaps listening to this? If you could kind of give him, a couple of bits and nuggets they can take forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me is, keep showing up through the bad times for a start, because the good times you'll have in cricket will be some of the best experiences you've had. One thing I would say, and we've evolved as a society over the last 20 years, as you boys know, and, one thing for me, for young bowlers growing up is be willing to take a bit of criticism to grow. I see a lot of young cricketers coming up now, who don't like to be told, something's not good enough or you need to improve. I think it's being open to improving your game and making sure you're better than or training harder than the other people and your peers to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, from what I'm picking up in this conversation, you seem open-minded. You seem like you reflect on your own game, and you seem quite logical, which they're all. You don't have to be extra special or talented to have those qualities, do you? I'm not saying you're not really talented, by the way. I'm just saying they're nice attributes to have.
Absolutely not, and that's why some of the most successful cricketers in the county game, aren't that most appealing on the eye. Whether that's they've got an action that's not that appealing or their technique when they bat. And I think ultimately what separates, the average from the good, is mindset. This game continues to change, evolve, adapt, and if you're not in that headspace, to go with it and take on those challenges, and you're going to fail. So it's a mental game for skillful people. That's how I would sum it up.
So I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think anyone that's played as long as you and got your record and won all these trophies deserves a lot of credit. And this information you're handing over has been spot on. I think we're probably getting towards the end of our chat, guys. I'm sure you're probably sick of me talking and all this stuff going on. But is there anything you've got going on? You've got a testimonial, haven't you, going this year?
I have, yeah. So, which is something to look forward to, right? It's exciting. You know, Giles White gave me a call a few days before Christmas and just said the club were in a position to award me a testimonial, you know, for my service towards Hampshire. So now that's starting to get underway. Something I'm incredibly proud of. And to be honest, I have to say a massive thank you as well to two of my best mates in James Vince and Liam Dawson, because they're both very worthy of, you know, a testimonial as well. And I think they both agreed that they would let me go first, but due to the probability that their career might slightly go on longer than mine. So I'm incredibly grateful for that, because if they did go ahead of me, you know, I might not have had this opportunity. So massive thanks to them and, you know, Hampshire. You know, I'm really looking forward to the year. Hopefully get 6 or 7 events and make it nice and successful.
Wish you all the best for that, Woody. You deserve it, mate. You've been an absolute stallion for Hampshire for years, mate. Literally just doing what you do. And I think it's well deserved, thoroughly deserved, mate.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right. Well, look, I'll wrap it up there. We're going to test my production skills again with a little bit of an outro, and we'll see how we go. But yeah, look, we really appreciate you coming on, being our first guest, and yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we've got it spot on. Yeah, you've been top class. So take it easy and wish you all the best for the season ahead.
Anytime. Cheers. I'll see you in the season, Wrighty.
Yeah, take it easy.
Cheers, boys.